Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to be back with another video entitled The Contender. The message: God gives select men and women the gift of boldness to deal with situations beyond the ordinary. These gifts are usually given to some ministers, apostles, leaders, prophets, holy men and women of God, because of the nature of the works that are needed to be performed for the people or the nation on behalf of God. So let us now look at some of the ways the gift is manifested or some. First, we have a sudden, unexpected appearance and declaration of a message. We see this, for example, with the prophet Elijah, who appeared before King Ahab in 1 Kings 18 to announce to the king that there will not be rain for 3 years because of the idolatry that the king and Jezebel had led the nation of Israel into. We see other instances, for example, like Moses appearing before Pharaoh in a great dramatic way, "Let my people go." And Queen Esther also appeared before the king, who was her husband, but she was a little bit more astute in the way she did stuff. Nonetheless, the affirmation was the same. And then we have a confrontation to determine which God is the greater God. And we have 3 examples we're going to point out. First, the test of Baal's prophet versus Elijah's God on Mount Carmel. Baal's prophet was the false god, and he had led Israel away from Yahweh, the great Jehovah God. And so that is the God that Elijah represents. And today, before the people gathered, it will be made plain which God is the great God, found in 1 Kings 18, 17 to 46. So on the mount, on the setting, we have the prophets of Baal, which are demonstrating force. And so they are calling on Baal to help them from morning until night. They are chanting, shouting, cutting their bodies and shedding blood. Versus we have Elijah, who built an altar and told the people to put several sets of buckets of water on the altar and a drain to collect the water. And then Elijah prayed and asked God to send down fire from on high to consume the water and everything that was on the altar, to demonstrate. And sure enough, God, in mighty condensation, sent down the fire, which burnt up and licked up all the water and so forth. And in the end, Israel turned back to God. We also have the casting out of demons to expose the works of the kingdom of Satan. And that was a very pertinent, if not the most important sign in Jesus' ministry, so that the people really knew that he was the Messiah. And so we have several examples. One example we have there with the demonic guy who had all this amount of demons, And when God cast them out, he said, where should they go? And he said, well, send them to the pigs. And they ran into the pigs, and then the pigs ran down to the sea, and they were all drowned. And then there was chaos in the city because of the economic reasons. And God also sent out his apostles. When he sent them out, he said to cast out the demons. Some of them were easy and some of them were difficult. These demons make life very uncomfortable for people in the family, in the village, and so forth. Yeah, in the nation sometimes. And so they create a lot of problems. And from my observation, one of the reasons is because of the breaking of the commandment 9 and 10. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's, assets. And so some people, for some reasons, they want what others have, beyond their ability. And so in some cases, they will go to make the contracts, to get riches and so on. And in other instances you have where they will send spirits and unto the others to prohibit them from progressing in life. And so, and there are a host of other reasons, that people get entangled with this demonic stuff. And, some go for marriages and all manner of things, for success in business and different things. But these things, these demons, they are not to be tampered with. God's people are not to tamper with them. But the interesting part about it is when we all hear the gospel and people are confronted with what Jesus Christ won, the life of Jesus Christ, now they have to go. So some people have enough power within themselves with the Spirit of God to get them to go. Like Jesus said, tell them to go and they will flee from you. But others need help, they need intervention, they need deliverance, and so that is one of the, so you need a very strong spirit. And as a matter of fact, that's a gift. And not anybody could do that. You can even get yourself possessed if you don't have the right spirit and the right atmosphere. All right, so I'm not going to say anything more about that one. That is not my gift. And then we have war. Yes, war. We have to see whichever side won, that is the God that won. So so we have here David versus Goliath in 1 Samuel 17. All right, Israel was in battle, and they were just at a standstill in the valley because they had this giant who was, and Saul, who was then king, was afraid of the giant because God had actually rejected him already for his disobedience. And so Israel is there at war, but this giant is just coming, Goliath, and threatening Israel, and nobody will go to war. And then King David, David, little boy, wasn't king yet. He came in, his father sent him to the battlefield to bring some food for his brothers, and he was rudely arrested by the threat of this giant. And David, who is this dog, he called him. So David decided that he would challenge the giant. And first Saul didn't want him to go. Not that he didn't want him to go. What he did was, he probably recognized that it was God. So what he did was to give his armor, putting on the armor unto David, this heavy gay garment. And David said, look, I can't go with that. But David took up the challenge, and he went, and he faced the giant. He said to the giant, Goliath, I come to you You come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, with stone and with sling and slingshot. David killed the giant with one stone that went deep into his forehead and threw him down. And let me look at the unconventional nature of the contender while we are on David. The contender is not so much concerned about, well, it's concerned, the contender is concerned about what works. Now, I just realized, ladies and gentlemen, that I did not give you a definition when I started for the word contender. Well, in this case, we are not looking at it in a negative connotation, social-wise. We are looking at it in the spiritual sense, where this person with the strong personality is gifted and will do exploits for God. I think that was in the message, But yeah, so the contender, the unconditional nature continuing, is not the contender, the one who strives for you on behalf of God. Is not concerned, is concerned with what works best for the situation, not what is the norm or the convention. Okay? If the thing works, that is what they would use, regardless of what you're accustomed to. You see, David, the normal thing in battle was to dress up with army gears, sword and shield and sandals and foot and everything. But David was not, trained in that military way. But he was trained in faith and in doing faith exploits, fighting giants and lions and so forth, and flinging stones and so on. So he had that kind of accuracy with his hand. So that is what was working. And he needed enough lightness to be able to fling and so forth. So he could not put on the army gear. That would have set him back, and maybe he might have lost, and he might have lost his life as well. So the army gears was too heavy and impractical. Okay, and I said before, he might lose. So we work with what one is comfortable with. So David was comfortable with stones and a slingshot. That worked best for David. What the main concern is that the lion is dead. The giant is dead in the quickest time. And the battle is won. And there again, there is rejoicing of the people with the strength and force of Yahweh. And then let's look now at the contender as intercessor. Yes, as I said, contender. You contend with God. Fight with God. Challenge with God. The contender as intercessor. And one that pleads on behalf of the nation before God. For example, we have the king of Nineveh. The prophet Jonah had prophesied that God will destroy that wicked city. But the thing about it is that, well, and that's the good thing I like about God, And you can see this application here in Corona 19. God always sends a warning before. So to give the people a chance, to make it right or to disobey. So in this case, the king accepted the warning, and he went down in sackcloth and ashes, and he called the whole nation to fast before the Lord. In the end, the Lord forgave them and renewed the city. And so life again was happy because that city of Nineveh was not destroyed. Later on, we will see Moses again contending with God for Israel. Then we have public stickability. Public stickability to truth, to one's faith. With the affirmation, if I perish, I perish. And we see this in the experience in Daniel 3. We see several experiences. When we say Daniel 3, with the 3 Hebrew boys, they were princes, the 3 Hebrew princes. The 3 Hebrew boys or the 3 Hebrew princes, PRNCS. And yes, the king had announced that everybody should bow in honor of him when they hear the sound of the trumpet. But ladies and gentlemen, Israel don't bow. Israel don't bow down to no king. Israel don't bow down to anybody except God. So the Hebrew children did not bow. They were thrown in the fire, and they didn't care. And this is something that I observe. This matter of the Easterners, the Easterners, they value for life as we have it in the West. It's not like that. If I perish, I perish. They don't care. God is able, but if He's not able, we will render unconditional obedience. Okay, we on the West, we are not cultured that way. So then, when it comes to crisis and making certain types of decision, we might benefit a lot if we learn from the culture of the West in making certain kinds of decisions. All right. We also have Joseph in prison. The prophet, and we also had the president Daniel. Again, in his situation, he was challenged with obeying God through praise. And again, Daniel is a Jew. A Jew don't bow to anyone. So Daniel just continued what he was doing. He did not care of the consequence. They know that God is able. And God is able to vindicate himself. So they just went ahead and did what they are accustomed to do, and he was thrown in prison among the lions. And at the end of the day, it contributed to the strengthening of the king's faith, because it was a plot. But you see, so what is important in these situations here is that this kind of decisions is going to penetrate deep into the minds of very, very important people, digging deep and vindicate God. And so that is what the essence is. God is, and he is able to defend himself. We will render unconditional obedience, stickability to one's faith publicly in challenge. And then we have facing Moses now, facing God with an argument. Now that's a very brave one. Facing God with an argument. And we see, for example, this situation with Moses and God on Mount Sinai, particularly. And for emphasis, in Exodus 32, all of Exodus 32, we have that scenario, right? Exodus 32. And for a summary, God called Moses and Joshua to come up to the mountain, Mount Sinai, for instructions on Israel's government. 40 days passed, or 40 days came, and we passed, and they did not see, Israel did not see Moses come back. So, they decided to take matters into their own hands, because they say Moses, most likely God killed him in the mountain. So they decided to take matters in their own hands for their own management. But the question on destiny, but the question is, did they know what their management was? And did they know what their destiny was? They had to wait on God, but lack of patience. So they approached Aaron, Moses' brother, who was left in charge at the bottom of the mountain, and they commanded him to make them an Egyptian god, who will be their god. So Aaron asked them for the earrings and I guess the other forms of jewelry, and he melted them into a liquid bowl, and he coined this calf. And the children of Israel began, this is the calf here, and this one here, this is Moses. Moses is up on the mountain, and Israel is below, waiting. This camp of Israel at the bottom. And that is taken from 19th century, an oil painting by Jean-Léon Jerome, okay, depicting Moses receiving the 10 commandments from God on Mount Sinai. So Moses is up there where you see the bright light is. And you say, well, that's it. So, make us this God. So this is the God that Aaron made, the calf. Now you see Aaron. And so Israel is rejoicing and marrying and reveling in the idolatry to the disgust of God. And God finally vomited them out in his anger. And Moses argued with God. So, this is what God said. And the Lord God said unto Moses, go, get thee down for thy people, which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt. Now, it's God that brought the people out of the land of Egypt, And God said, my people. But now God is so angry at they turning away into idolatry. He dismissed them. He said, your people, who you brought out of the land of Egypt, they have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made a molten calf and have worshipped it, and have sacrificed unto it, and said, These are thy God, O Israel, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt. And the Lord God said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore leave me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make unto thee a great nation. But Moses argued with God. To think of the surrounding nations who would say what the surrounding nations would say when they heard the story of how God killed Israel in the wilderness. So this is what Moses is saying to God. And Moses besought the Lord his God and said, Lord, why doth thy wrath wax hot against thy people? So Moses is giving him back the attribution which thou hast brought forth out of the land of Egypt. They are yours, with great power and with a mighty hand. Wherefore should the Egyptians speak and say, For mischief did he bring them out, to slay them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from thy fierce anger, O Lord, and repent of this evil against thy people. Moses is talking to God. In other words, Moses is putting sense in God's head. So you see the displacement of thought with the anger. So then, God changes his mind. He listened to Moses and he spared the people. And the Lord repented of the evil which he had taught to do unto the people. Okay? So now watch it. Moses, God is angry. It was not Moses that was angry. Moses is thinking, but God is angry. So now let us observe the mindsets and the types of decision making with the type of mindsets. So we have Moses in verses 11 to 14 and God in verses 7 to 11. These were the passages I read them before. Now, God is angry. He's emotionally overwhelmed. He ejected the people. God said to Moses, your people who you led in the wilderness. And Moses, you see, Moses, the thinking one then, he thought about the consequences. Stop God. And he stopped God from acting irrationally. And he gave him back the responsibility for the people as his people. Thy people, whom thou hast brought out of the wilderness. Now, so God, after he repented, he sent Moses down with the 10 Commandments on these 2 tablets of stone. Now, mind you, Moses did not have the experience that God had. God had the crisis first, the emotional crisis first. When he upheld the idolatry, being God, he could see from anywhere. But Moses saw how he behaved, and Moses rationally, talked him into sense. No, so then Moses said, Moses, go. So Moses go down with the 10 Commandments in his hand, and he's going on with Joshua now. So, interestingly, Moses now, while Moses was in his mode of cognition or thinking, he did not see nor experience emotionally what God had experienced. So when Moses returned to the camp, actually on the onset, and saw the plight of Israel's condition in idolatry, with all the revelry and the loud music and dancing and so on, and the lustful display. Moses was so overwhelmed with anger and righteous indignation that he too acted irrationally. He broke the commandments, threw it down, splash it, and he burned the molten calf, and he put it in water, and he put the ashes in water, and he made the people drink it. Now, let's look at some questions or major question on the experience together with some lessons. The question: what were the characters' first response in experiencing the crisis? First response. Now, God was angry and he made bad decision. Angry, overwhelmed. He said, spit them out. I will kill them. I will exterminate them from the face of the earth. And I'll make you Moses. And we throw them out of his sight. So he was angry, a bad decision. And Moses too, when he beheld the reality of the situation, he too got angry. He broke the commandments. And he melted the ashes, he melted the cow into ashes, burned it into ashes, and he gave the people the water to drink. Now, let's look at some lessons. So, though knowledge, lesson 1, though knowledge brings balanced thinking, as we saw in the case of Moses, with God counseling him, it is not experience. It is not experience. 2, one does not know what he or she will act, how he or she will act in a situation until he or she is actually in the situation. Now, we can have aspirations as to what we will do, but we do not actually know how we will behave until we get into the situation. I am sure Moses will not have seen that he will behave the way that he behaves, seeing that he comes with God. But it's when you actually get into the situation, that is how you actually know how you behave. 3, lesson 3. It seems normal that people may change their minds in a crisis if the weight of the situation or the outcome seems too overwhelming. And that was the case of God. He went to the people. And so God did it, and Moses also did it. Change. And so you can have these erratic decisions. That is why, so people, your good friend, your husband, people that you trusted in crisis, they can run away from you. The situation is too overwhelming and the shock is too great. All right? These may not necessarily be real decisions, but they are important because it is demonstrating behaviors, and that's how we learn. That's where we get wisdom from. And 4, lesson 4. The leader may not necessarily be the stronger character in crisis. And we saw that with Moses. Moses proved to be the better thinker than God. I mean, look at his story. I'm just looking at his story. Alright? And in that case now, you actually see that when God is with man, he's very human. 5, lesson 5, one can always make amends after foolish decisions. And we see the amends. God amended his ways. Moses also made amends and so on. We see just now. So nothing is impossible with God. And the angels ask Sarah this question, and I think it's in Genesis, some parts of Genesis, but I think it is echoed some parts as, is anything too hard for God? All right, that was the question the angels asked Sarah when the Lord had told her that she would bear a child at 90, I think it was 90, yes, and she laughed. And the angels asked, is anything too hard? So many times, we stick in mud. We stick in, barbed wire. We stick in prisons of our minds because we think that the decisions that we have made, they are too difficult. The impact is too great, for us to make changes. In some cases, the exposure. So some people prefer to remain where they are. And many people, they do not want solutions. They don't want to go forth and get solutions. They know the situations are bad, but they prefer to wallow in it. You know something? These things are very weighty, very weighty, and can even lead the good people who think about you, it can lead them into difficult pathways, because you're frustrating them. So, and we have heard people talk about these things, and I've experienced them myself, not moving towards the answers. So one can always make amends for foolish decisions. Nothing is impossible with God. Okay? And remember the promise. He said he will make a way in the wilderness. I think Isaiah 42 talks about the Lord will open up pathways in the desert, and he would lead the blind by ways that they have not known. So now let's look at the contender as an intercessor. Yeah, we want Moses as an intercessor. Moses, you see, Moses, he contend with God. So look at Moses as the contender as intercessor. We saw it with the king of Nineveh, and now we're going to see Moses now atoning for Israel on Mount Sinai. So Moses came, and he broke the commandments and everything. So now he's going to go back now to God. And so Moses in verse 31 and 32 returns to the Lord in the mountain and pleads for Israel. We're going to read it. I think it's verse 30. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses said unto the people, ye have sinned a great sin. And now I will go up unto the Lord. Watch it. Peradventure, I shall make an atonement for your sins. In other words, peradventure, you always give the situation a chance for change. Peradventure. Open up. Peradventure. All right? That is where you give faith a chance. So I will go up. And Moses returned unto the Lord. All right? And he said, these people, and he said unto the Lord, oh, these people have sinned a great sin, and have made them gods of gold. Yet now, if thou wilt forgive their sins, and